Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin and today we have a new topic to discuss. Specifically, we're going to be talking about why some customers become repeat customers. Now, this isn't necessarily how to land repeat customers, but it can definitely lead you to repeat customers. The basic gist of repeat customers in general is there are going to be some customers who call once and you might not ever hear from them again. But there are some customers who call over and over again, and they rely on you to become their go-to for solving their problems. I have certain customers who, before they contact any other tradesperson, they call me first to, one, find out if I can do it, and if I can't, they'll ask for my recommendations. That's a good relationship to have with a customer because there are things that, some people might not even think that you know how to do that you can do and then obviously make some money on it as well. But over time, I've noticed that there's patterns when it comes to how certain customers become repeat customers and how that kind of happens in almost a natural format leading very specifically. So that said, it usually starts small. You'll have a customer call you, they'll ask you for something minor, a faucet replacement, a ceiling fan that needs to be replaced, a small drywall repair, a door adjustment, or they might have a punch list that needs to get taken care of where it's a number of smaller items. Those customers, in some cases, they're feeling you out. There's a lot of customers who are going to fill you out with a small repair to begin with because they want to see what your pricing is. They want to see how the experience is working with you, those kind of things. So when you have those scenarios that happen, it's almost like a job interview. Now, obviously, if you do in-person estimates, that's a job interview by itself. That's your opportunity to really sell whatever the project is that you're working on. However, if you're past the estimate phase and they've called you and they've already said, hey, we want to do this, what's the cost? You might not have to go out there to see the faucet before you do a replacement for the faucet. So they're going to, in some cases, test you with something smaller. A lot of customers, they tend to do that. Now, if it's something that they need done right away, they might agree to your price, even though they're not happy with your price, and chances are you might not hear back from those customers because they realize that you're on the higher end of what they were expecting. But the important thing is that most long-term customers, those relationships don't start with a huge project. I can tell you not that it can't happen, but I've had very few customers approach me about a massive project to begin with. Generally speaking, that's not very common. It can happen, but it doesn't happen very often. Most customers are going to come to you with a smaller project, and then that'll lead into the larger projects as time goes on. Communication matters. You have to be able to answer your calls. I've said this before. I have never been very good about answering the calls. I recently signed up with a receptionist service so that I could get my calls answered. That's a learning curve by itself because some of my existing customers or customers that I already have set in a situation where they know the reputation of they're going to get a hold of me. I'm the person that they interact with. Those customers, it was kind of a wake-up call of, whoa, what's going on? Who is this? Is this the right company? Is this a different company kind of situation? If you can't pick up the call because you can't afford the receptionist service and you are just a one-man band for now, you need to make sure that you're returning your messages. You have to set expectations with the customers. You have to explain what you're going to do to a certain degree. I'm not saying you need to get in the nitty-gritty. That's all going to be dependent on the customer themselves. But if a customer wants to know what you're going to do and wants more detail, you need to be able to provide that detail to them. You also need to keep them informed. The best way to do that is, obviously, if you send out an estimate, you should follow up. If your software or CRM software that you have doesn't follow up with customers, you should send a text message directly to the customer as well to say, hey, I'm just following up on the estimate. Maybe the day after you send the estimate, follow up and say, is there any questions that you have? My software automatically sends reminders. I think it's like 3 days and 5 days after I send out the estimate. It will then prompt them. And in some cases, they might have seen the original email, but they lost track of it and they didn't go back to it. And that extra email reminds them to go back and take a look. But a lot of the problems, so then you go from estimates to when you're scheduling, you should be calling them and trying to schedule. If you're on if they're comfortable with text messages, setting up things through text message so you have everything in writing as to when you've planned on coming. You should send out booking confirmations of when you're exactly coming. If you don't have a CRM software, one, get a CRM software. But two, if you don't have a CRM software, you should be sending out reminder texts or Google Calendar notifications at the very least, because those things are free. They don't cost anything to do those, and it keeps your customer informed. I don't personally do this because I have a reputation of when I tell them a time, I show up on time. But if you give arrival windows, you should be sending them a text when you're on your way. If you are not showing up at a very specific time and you're giving them a window, make sure they realize that it's a window and not like hey, I'll be there at 9 to 2, but I'm actually going to be there at 2:50. If you're going to be late, make sure that they know. That kind of stuff, keeping them informed goes a long way. Reliability matters. Showing up when you say you're going to, or doing what you said you are going to do, and following through with what the work is that you're telling them you're going to do. It's not necessarily an exciting aspect of the job, but it is probably one of the most important things for repeat customers. You're never going to have a repeat customer who doesn't know who feels like they don't know what's going on. They feel like you're running late all the time. You're building a reputation with every single customer. This reputation precedes you. As you grow your business, as I'm currently growing my business, as I grow my business, that reputation extends to the people that you have working for you. If you're hiring a tech and they're going out and doing work in addition to yourself, that reputation extends to them. You want to obviously hire the right people, but you need to make sure that no matter what, you are reliable. Now, there are times where things will adjust. If you get big enough where you're trying to fit in more in your schedule and you need to give windows instead of exact times, just make sure that you're communicating that. Don't assume that a customer that you've had forever is going to know that if that's not how you've been doing business. Don't assume that because you send an email that says a window instead of an exact time, that they think that that's the exact time. I've had customers where my window is a 15-minute window. I give myself a 15-minute leadway because just the software requires a specific window. So I say, if I'm gonna, our appointment's at 9, it says I'll arrive between 9 and 9:15. If something unforeseen happens, I get stopped by a very long train, or there's an accident on the way to the job site, that protects me a little bit. I can tell you, out of the almost 5 years that I've been doing this full time, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I've been late to jobs maybe 3 or 4 times total. And we're talking in that 15-minute window, but I consider that late if I'm not there when I say. Coming from a military background, if you're 5 minutes early, you're already late. I like to get there early. I've talked about this in earlier episodes or earlier videos where, I try to get to a job site 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, and I park right around the corner and I just wait. I review my notes, I review the costs, to make sure that they know, I know what the price is ahead of time, things like that. All of those things said, you need to make sure that you have that reliability factor, because it really does matter. You need to solve the right problem for the customer. Customers don't always care how you're doing it. I have been guilty of this multiple times where I think to myself, it's a bad idea I need to explain exactly what I'm doing to them. You'll see their eyes gloss over. Sometimes customers, they could care the least about what exactly it is you have to do what you need to do. What they care about, some customers, what they care about is the price and the timing of how everything's going to work out. Is it going to be done within their time frame? Can you get it done by the time they want it done? Things like that. At the same time, there are other customers who 100% want to know exactly what you're doing. They want to be super involved. And if that's the case, then that's the case. But you have to recognize that. Sometimes all they care about is that the issue is resolved. And you just need to understand that the goal for the customer is what matters more than anything else. If you cannot provide them with the solution, then you should try to have a solution of where they can go next if you can't provide it for them. Familiarity has value. Customers already know you. They've already interacted with you. I've had customers with small children who, if you're friendly with the children or you're friendly with their dogs or their cats or their pets in general, they remember those things. When you walk in, 9 times out of 10, if a customer has a dog, they're like, "Oh, don't worry, the dog's real nice. They're just really excited." That's every dog. I've rarely met a dog that doesn't get excited about seeing somebody new. So the thing is, when you have those interactions with a dog or a child or any sort of, anybody or anything outside of that normal realm of communication that you've had originally. Let's say you've always talked to the husband. When you interact with the wife, you need to make sure that you build that familiarity so that they're comfortable with you. The customers that I have kids, I always say hi, I always say hello. If they are very interested in what you're doing, I don't discourage them from asking questions. It shows that you are good with people, and customers want they want people around who are good with people. But then in addition to that, they want to know how your process works. They're going to come back to you because they appreciate how you do things. They know what to expect, and hiring someone new always carries a certain level of uncertainty. So the familiarity plays into it. If you do a good job, there's a high probability they're going to call back. They might not call back right away because not everybody needs everything done right away. But the reality is that it can still be done. Ultimately, as I said earlier, small jobs lead to bigger jobs. You're going to get punch lists and small repairs and service calls from customers, but a lot of those jobs lead to bigger projects. I had a customer who had a small punch list of different things that needed to be done. I think it was about a year and a half after I started working for them and did a number of different small jobs or punch lists for them. They approached me and asked me if I could remodel their basement. It was not a small project. It was a big project. And that's how you get that. You build that familiarity, and they want you to do the work more than anybody else. And in some cases, your reputation can precede you in the sense of, I've had customers who tell me they want to work with me even though I'm telling them I'm booked out for larger projects until 2 months from now. They say, "Okay, when can you come by and take a look at everything so that way we can get you on the schedule?" But that, again, it's because you have that reputation. It's not always about price. You'll learn very quickly that repeat customers know how you price. You might raise your prices slightly, and occasionally you'll get a question about, did your prices go up, things like that. But most of the time, customers, they understand your pricing in the sense of they're not being blindsided by your pricing. I've had customers who say, "Here's a list of things to do. When can you come?" And I'm saying, "Well, do you want me to send you an estimate?" "No, just let me know when you can do the work." Because they know my pricing to a certain level, and because they know my pricing to a certain level, they don't necessarily need to know how much it's going to cost. It's not to say you can't inform them if you're concerned about the list being too big or the project being too large. You really should give them an estimate. But if it's just a punch list or a simple repair, you could just shoot them a quick number and say, "I just want to make sure this is okay." They'll find that they'll appreciate that. But cheap isn't always the deciding factor. And honestly, if cheap is a deciding factor, then that's not your ideal customer to begin with. Repeat customers make business easier. You have a certain familiarity with how things are, how they operate, how things need to get done, where things are, and that actually can make you more efficient in the long run. There's less time spent estimating because they know how you work. There's less uncertainty. You'll have smoother communication with existing customers who are repeat customers. And like I said, you just have a better understanding of the property as a whole. That will just make you more efficient. You'll have a certain understanding of how things work, and it makes it easier to do what you need to do. What surprised me probably more than anything is how many repeat customers you have, or you will end up having, or specifically I had. But repeat customers are ideal. And I will say, like, I think I've given this number before when I've talked about customers as a whole. The majority of my customers are repeat customers. At this given moment, I have about 6 text messages from existing customers that I need to respond to after I finish this video, of customers that in some cases I haven't talked to in 6 months. Some of them I've talked to a month ago, but they're all customers with new projects that want to get on the books to get things done. Those repeat customers are super ideal because they also are the customers who are going to refer you to their friends. They're not going to refer you to people that, you know, they don't deem as worthy of you. And because of that, that is an ideal situation. There's a lot of business that comes from these relationships with the repeat customers and then referrals from the repeat customers. There's a lot of business. Don't forget about, or I shouldn't say don't forget, but don't downplay how important these customers can be. They reach out once, they reach out twice, that's immediately a repeat customer. Treat them as if you are their answer for their solutions when it comes to home services, because that's how they're treating you. So I would make sure that you don't forget how important those repeat customers are, but most repeat customers are not created by one individual great job. Sometimes it has to be a couple of different jobs that you do to build that familiarity, to build that rapport with the customer. They're created specifically by doing consistent work, doing the small things right over time. Sometimes you have to do a bunch of small jobs for a customer before it leads to a big job. And sometimes you don't even necessarily want the big jobs, but you want to be the one that they ask if you can do the big jobs. I had a customer, that basement job that I mentioned earlier, specifically that customer, I would have probably not taken on that basement remodel if it wasn't for the fact that they specifically wanted to do it in the winter when I was already a little bit slower to begin with. They specifically asked me to take a look at the project like a week after Christmas and immediately said, you know, are you open to doing this? And I wouldn't have been if it wasn't just the right time of the year. If they would have asked me in the middle of the summer, the answer probably would have been no. But it worked out for me. So those are things to consider. Reliability isn't exciting, but it does matter. And that leads to repeat customers, repeat business, and then referral from those repeat customers. And that's what's super important. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of The Handyman in the Field. I hope you guys are enjoying. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video. Be sure to check out This Week in the Field, which is a weekly series I release on I release that on Monday mornings, which recaps my entire week of handyman jobs, pricing, and other things that go into running the handyman business. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Dustin with The Handyman in the Field. We'll see you guys next time.